expatiated upon by the Martinican intellectual Frantz Fanon in his well widely documented work, The Wretched of the Earth. And this opportunity that we have today, in my judgment, sir, and I want to start by signaling my respect and my profound appreciation to the Prime Minister of Barbados for ensuring that this was located early on the order paper of this House, because it is a very important discussion. And in my judgment, it relates to some fundamental issues, sir, not just about the level and type of justice that is meted out to persons of African descent, not only in America but around the world. And in that regard, the leader of the opposition is entirely correct when he asks us and invites us to focus on Barbados. But it also must speak, sir, to the issues of the equitable treatment of black people and their equitable access to resources, the equitable access, sir, to opportunity, sir, and to the distribution of resources, not only in the United States of America, but here in Barbados as well. What has not been said in this debate, and what I think needs to be said, is why it is relevant for us in Barbados. And sir, it is important for us to accept and to understand that this country was once the colony. This country was once the colony that allowed the British, or in which the British were able to perfect the system of plantation slavery. And not only to perfect the system of plantation slavery as a model, but to export that model from Barbados, sir, to the southern United States of America, specifically to the Carolinas. And that allowed, sir, for people who were perhaps among the most elite of the plantocracy in the Caribbean, certainly the most elite of the plantocracy in Barbados, and not only among the most elite of the plantocracy, but the most barbaric of the plantocracy, the most pugnacious and rapacious of the plantocracy, sir, to be granted titles, royal charters, titles of Lord Proprietor. They went on, in some instances, to become the second and third governor of the Carolinas. People, sir, like John Yeaman, who once ran that which we now know as St. Nicholas Abbey, and Colleton from the famous Colleton Great House in St. Peter, sir, and others. And, Mr. Speaker, the importance of that ability for this colony to colonize another colony. And in fact, it is the only time it happened in history that a colony colonized another colony. Was the transfer, sir, of a system, a pyramidic structure of oppression and exploitation based on race, sir. And the importance of the transfer is seen in the fact that the first slave laws written in the United States of America were enacted in Boston, Massachusetts, sir, in 1641. But it was 20 years later that the Barbadian plantocracy were able to settle the Carolinas and transfer the system of plantation slavery and all that went with it in 1663 and beyond. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, there is something, therefore, that connects us in Barbados to that which is the social and psychological and the cultural reality of the United States of America. Our journeys, sir, have been exceptionally similar. And the social psychological structure of supremacy based on race and elitism and indeed class in the aftermath of the slavery experience, sir, is all part and parcel of the same puzzle. And therefore, sir, while on humanitarian grounds, we can obviously understand that there is a deep concern about that which has happened to George Floyd and others before him, we must also understand, sir, that it is part and parcel of the story that we have to tell in Barbados, and to as the leader of the opposition quite rightly says, to dig deep into exploring where the continued weaknesses and deficiencies in our social structure lie. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, it is not only George Floyd. 12 days after him, it was another unarmed black man in a car park in the Wendy's, shot in the back by another white policeman. And 2 days ago, a Father's Day greeting was a noose for America's only black race car driver in his garage stall at the famous Talladega Speedway in Alabama, deep south. The thinking remains the same, Mr. Speaker, sir, and it is not a question of the atrocities being new or the atrocities being more frequent. The atrocities are captured by modern technology, and they are therefore something that is there for the whole world to see, and perhaps for those who are more conscious to become horrified about now. But the point of departure for us must be, sir, to understand that these things all bear witness to the message that was immortalized by Billie Holiday in 1939 when she wrote that which became the Time magazine Song of the Century, Strange Fruit Hanging from Southern Trees. And the younger members of this chamber who find a lot of time to go to Machel Montano, but will not learn about those things at a Montano concert, need to know, sir, that southern trees bear strange fruit, that blood is to be found on the leaves and blood on the root, black bodies swinging in the breeze, strange fruit hanging from poplar trees. That, sir, was the song that expressed the tortured social reality of the 1930s in the United States of America. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, it also gave birth to social investigation, which was being done by intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois, who, like the two speakers who spoke before me, sir, were prepared to approach this matter from a position of studied and steady, conservative schools of analysis. And there's nothing wrong with that, because quite frankly, that is where Dr. King was located. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, that even as W.E. Du Bois was to witness the lynching of a man called Sam Hose, and he sought to intellectualize this, and he wrote a letter that was to be published in the newspaper, and he making his way to the newspaper, Mr. Speaker, to drop off his letter, to intellectualize that which horrified him, and he felt he could reason with the American society, the white supremacists of the South. He passed a shop where he saw Sam Hose's hand for sale. The charred hand, the charred knuckles of the black man that had just been cut down from a tree, where his body was burnt and then dismembered, and his limbs were now being offered for sale. And it was at that juncture, sir, that W.E.B. Du Bois came to understand that there was a social and psychological reality buried deep in the American system, buried deep in American culture and society, very similar to the vein of that which has been buried deep in Barbadian society, that says that there's a dispensability, an unessential nature to black people and the way in which they are treated. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important to understand that Du Bois then made an observation that I think continues to haunt all of us to this day, that we as a black race are confronted with a double consciousness. On one hand, we are invited to accept the democracy in which we live. And we reach out for this ideal, we grasp it with both hands. Our people, and we all here are here as a part of that process, where people go every time an election is called and they vote in hope and in anticipation. And then the other side of that consciousness, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that they are greeted very often with disappointment and disillusionment and they are visited with a denial of opportunity and a denial of equitable distribution of resources and a denial of those things which can empower them as a people, sir. And so for developmental purposes, yes, we all can hold hands and properly agonize and sympathize about that which is taking place in the United States today. But for humanitarian purposes, sir, that is one thing. But for developmental purposes, we have, sir, also to look at the lives in Barbados and to be sure that they are treated as though they fundamentally matter. And that is the point to which the leader of the opposition spoke, and I must confess, sir, that I agree with him wholeheartedly on that matter. It was a week ago to the day, sir, that I stood here in this house and I made the observation that there are certain people who invest in this country who have benefited from large concessions, sir, and that the way they have responded to labor, the way they respond to the people who sent me here, Mr. Speaker, and who sent you where you sit, is that they visit on them a 3-month contract, so that their relationship to employment is one of 3 months. And the question for those people, sir, is how do they eke out an existence? How do you go to the bank and negotiate a loan on the basis of the fact that you're working for 3 months? How, Mr. Speaker, sir, are you able to fix the house in which you live, to get the financing on the basis of that evidence that you're there for 3 months, Mr. Speaker, sir? It was in this house, not this physical location, but this parliament, a year ago, that I spoke, and I speak this way, Mr. Speaker, sir, because I begin with regard to the ministry that I am given the privilege and opportunity to lead. A year ago, I came to this parliament and explained the fact that in the Bridgetown port, there was a company that would have had the benefit of 85% of the business passing through that port in terms of human traffic, cruise, visitors to this island. 85%. But there are 300 taxi drivers in the Bridgetown port, Mr. Speaker, sir, who get 5% of the business. Do those lives not matter? And are these not the issues that we must now intervene in order to make sure that there's a distributive intervention in the interest of justice, that there's equality of opportunity, equality of access to resources, Mr. Speaker, sir? That is what the debate has to be about in Barbados. It is not a matter, sir, of waging war against anybody of any color. It is a matter, sir, of trying to make sure that we rectify imbalances that have haunted this society from time immemorial, as far back as the memory of man doth run. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important for me, I feel, as a member of this parliament, to speak this way in this house, because this house was the tool that was used to systematically oppress the working class people of Barbados, the black people of Barbados. All is the same. I heard a distinction being made by leader of the opposition as to whether it's race or class. Well, let me explain to the leader of the opposition, that is an artificial dichotomy. It is an artificial dichotomy. The reality of this thing is that the working class are the black people in Barbados. You will find one or two in one or two parishes of the island, but they represent a very small handful of exception. And we all know that skin color in Barbados gives opportunity to many things and denies opportunity equally to many people. In 1708, Mr. Speaker, this Parliament passed an act to prohibit inhabitants of Barbados from employing Negroes in selling or in bartering. It was in 1733, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this Parliament passed an act for the better governance of Negroes, that is what it is called, to prohibit them from huckstering, going after the poor people. The knee is on the throat of the poor people. Not satisfied, in 1749, this Parliament was used as a tool to pass an act to prevent Negroes from assembling in huckster shops. The working class. There were no white hucksters. None, Mr. Speaker, sir. 1774, this Parliament passed an act to prohibit Negroes from carrying goods and wares and merchandise, and to prohibit them from selling house to house around the island. Mr. Speaker, sir, the knee was placed in the neck of the working class people of Barbados, black people in Barbados, who were trying to eke out an economic existence. But Parliament was the tool used to stop them. And it goes on and on, Mr. Speaker, sir. 1811, all black vendors to be removed from Robert Street, Swan Street, Broad Street, and prohibited from vending in any form in those locations. This Parliament. And if it sounds familiar to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is because in your lifetime and mine, we have seen it, where the authorities use the same streets, the same exact locations in Bridgetown to hound working class people into submission, because there is a structure buried deep in the vein of this society that believes that their